government, particularly in the last 20 or 30 years, has left much to be desired. And I also agree that the operation of the opposition has not been very much better. But I don't believe that in the 21st century we can have a functioning democracy if we keep on weakening government and opposition instead of trying to ensure that what has gone wrong with them is set right. I think that is, I think that one of the threats that I see to democracy in India comes from the excess of enthusiasm for social movements which are then set up in opposition to the state. I think that the idea that there is a civil society which will lead to the regeneration of India and we don't need the state is, I think, a wrong idea. It's a misleading idea. And it's interesting to see that we have traveled full circle to come to this position. You know, when the country became independent and set itself the task of creating a new constitution, I think people at that time believed that the state would be the main instrument for the regeneration of society. They felt that for more than 100 years, for nearly 200 years, we have been under a colonial state, which did not mean well by us. Its intentions were very limited and not always honest. It could have done many things, but it did not desire to do those things. Now we have inherited a state. It is our state, and this state we can use for the creation and the regeneration of society. I think at that time people felt that it was the state which would be the instrument for the regeneration of society. That society had many deficiencies and many defects, and the best instrument for correcting those deficiencies and defects was the state. Now, I think that too much was expected of the state at that time. But this point of view was very strongly expressed by Dr. Ambedkar in the Constituent Assembly. I think in some ways Dr. Ambedkar saw much further than most other members of the Constituent Assembly as to what the threats to democracy were and from where they were likely to come. And he said in the Constituent Assembly, democracy in India is only a top dressing on an Indian soil which is essentially undemocratic. We must not forget that. We must not forget that. Dr. Ambedkar believed that the state could be used as an instrument to alter the character of the Indian soil, which he strongly believed was essentially undemocratic. You see, the problem with us and democracy in India has been that there is a contradiction between the ideals of democracy, which place the highest value on equality, and the social order or the social medium within which it has to operate, which is a very hierarchical society. We have inherited a very hierarchical society from the past. And that is the basic challenge in India. And I think that the state too has an important contribution to make to the regeneration of society. I think that too much was expected of the state at the time of independence. It is our state. We have the freedom now to shape it in whatever way we want to. And there were great men who were trying to shape a new order in Indian society through the constitution and through the state. Ambedkar, Nehru, Patel, Pant, they really were men of a very outstanding ability, and they really believed that they could do this and they were free to do it now. But then things didn't work out in that way. And the state showed itself as being more and more inept, inefficient, corrupt, embroiled in all kinds of, and you read about all that in the papers. But I would state that despite all this, government and opposition are still important institutions in India. And I think no matter what we might say about Parliament and what goes on in Parliament, we can see in our sitting room on television what goes on in Parliament, and it's not a very pretty sight. Despite all of that, I believe that it is these institutions of democracy, Parliament and the Supreme Court, and even the political parties, that has kept at bay the army in India, and I think that is a great role for them to have played. If you look at the countries around us, you will find that the operation of democracy is so ineffective that the army invariably steps in. In our case, the army has not played a terribly important part in Indian society. And Mrs. Rai was telling me that she sees me in the Lodi Gardens where I walk, and I used to walk together, he's now no more, with a general in the Indian Army, General Prakash Menon. And we used to have long conversations, and from him it became obvious to me that he was in fear of the secretary and even the joint secretary in the defense ministry. They felt that it was those people who stood as blocks against what they wanted to do. I don't think that the generals in India feel that they own this country. They feel that this country is in the hands of other people, and it's good that they feel that way. And I think that one of the reasons why they feel that way is that the institutions of democracy, no matter how weak they may be in India today, are nevertheless important in comparison or in contrast to the countries that surround us. So that is the context in which I would like to present before you my argument about government and opposition. I believe that the success of democracy is as much the responsibility of the opposition as it is of the government. And I think in a healthy democracy, the opposition does not try to obstruct. It doesn't see its role as simply in obstructing the government. And the government doesn't see its role as simply evading the opposition. In a healthy democracy, government and opposition see themselves as alternating in power and in office. Whereas here, and there are special reasons to which I will come, this is not the general attitude of either the government or the opposition. So it's no use blaming only the opposition for obstructing proceedings in Parliament. We should blame the opposition for being so obstructive, but we must also blame the government for being evasive on every point. And it is only when disruption sets in that the government decides to take action. That is not how it should be. I think the idea of government and opposition is one in which, in a democracy, is one in which government and opposition see themselves as alternating in office. We who are in the opposition now must prepare ourselves for a future 5 years or 10 years hence when we will be in government. And we who are in government must prepare ourselves for a future when we will be in opposition in the hope that we will come back once again in the government. This attitude has not taken very strong roots in India, and in fact there are very special historical reasons why it has failed to take root in India.